Corey Seyler. Really appreciate you being on here, Corey. We're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills, the 2020 AFC East champions. And I know that's got to be a great feeling, especially knocking off pretty much the rule of the roost of New England.
Right. I think that that's funny. The stat was the Colts had won the AFC East more recently than the Bills. The last time they had won was 95. And I was like, well, I was in elementary school last time they won the AFC East, which is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's still crazy just to think this team, especially after the playoff run last year, the best thing they could do is just build off of that.
Right. I think that I was real skeptical when Beam went for it all with you trade the first round pick and a bunch more assets to the Vikings to get Diggs. And you get all the rumors about Diggs in Minnesota that he's a diva, that he brings nothing but baggage. And you start thinking like Terrell Owens and, the big name receivers that come in and just destroy a locker room. And I know what McDermott's trying to build. I'm like, I'm a little worried. And then watching the offseason footage, again, with COVID and everything, with the offseason with him and Allen and how those two just meshed, and he just makes that receiver room just so much better.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that was a huge pick-me-up for the Bills. How long have you been a fan of the Bills, and what led to the appeal of Buffalo?
So when I grew up out near Reading, PA, so when I was growing up, the Eagles were in the Randall Cunningham era. The Bills were good. A bunch of my friends in the neighborhood I grew up in were Bills fans, so they were on all the time. So we'd watch football on Sundays, and that just kind of stuck, and I stuck with the team even through the 4 Super Bowl losses. So I picked my team, and I stuck with them throughout up till now.
And being able to see all of the good and the bad, especially everything from the Music City Miracle on up and
Yep.
stuff like that. What is your most memorable moment as a Bills fan?
There's probably multiple. I'd say 99, the Music City Miracle, that was just the heart. Again, I was really too young to really realize Scott Norwood. 99, the Music City Miracle was terrible because I remember watching the Bills drive down, get the lead, and then come back down and go, oh, we let that happen. The one that sticks out the most is the most recent, and it wasn't even our team playing. It was watching Tyler Boyd rip the heart out of the Ravens when he caught that pass and took it in the end zone. I just remember watching the Bills fans and I'm down in my basement with my brother-in-law, and I'm losing my mind because it's been 20 years, since they made the playoffs, and I'm just like, this is crazy.
I heard a lot of Buffalo Bills fans donated to Andy Dalton's charity because of that play.
It was they donated like $400,000. It was a crazy amount of money. And I just remember watching it going, I'm like, even if we beat Miami, we have to hope the Bengals win. And the Bengals, I don't know if they were I can't remember if they were good that year or not. And I just remember just watching that play and just losing my mind. That was pretty memorable. And then you knew something was happening there. And they had the letdown season, but then last year was pretty good.
Expectations coming into the season. They talk about the pickup of Diggs and seeing everything after last year's playoff run. What was the big feeling going into this season, especially with the wins of the AFC East changing with Tom Brady going to Tampa?
Well, with Brady leaving, and I think looking at, again, I was thinking about this today when I was looking at your questions, and I went back to the Bills draft, and I said, man, you got rid of the 22nd or the 18th overall pick. You got Diggs, you drafted Zach Moss, and then you got Epinesa, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, let's see what happens. The defense is stout. There's some people opting out because of the situation. But I was like, if they don't win the division, it's going to be a disappointing year. Like that was my expectation with the number of people. And then that was if Josh Allen had to take that next step. If he doesn't take the next step, we're not going to win the division. The Patriots will win it again, or the Dolphins will win it.
Was there a surprise when you saw how good the Dolphins were, especially after a year before just sort of tanking and pretty much strip mining it, to see them go as far, especially, a rivalry between those two teams in that division?
I think that's a game I'm actually really looking forward to. The next two games we're looking forward to. And they've taken a step and they've drafted well. Flores brings a lot of what New England had. So I think that's one of the things that it was unexpected, but I think they're trending in the right direction. They also benefited the schedule. You go and beat who's in front of you, but they beat some quality teams.
Was there a point in the season that you felt, okay, Bills are going back to the playoffs?
I would say it's been the last 3 games. It was funny. I made a comment that this is the first time I've been able to watch the Bills 3 weeks in a row, and I can't remember how long, because they played on Saturday against the Broncos, they played on Sunday night against the Steelers, and then the previous Monday night against San Francisco. And all 3 of those games, I said, Miami's on their heels. They have to go at least 3-1, if not 2-2, and hope that last game against Miami. I'd say after this weekend's game, it was, you knew they were in, and the way they won it was emphatic. But I think that was, they needed to have this stretch where they had to play confident, because their stretch against the Chiefs and the Titans, and then even the Jets game where they didn't score a touchdown, they had 6 field goals. They just couldn't put it together. There was a month where they couldn't put it together in the middle of the season, where it was just like, what's going on with this team?
Speaking of that, did you feel like at any point that this division was Buffalo's to lose and that they might not make the playoffs again?
When the Titans game got canceled, then they moved it. They were playing the Chiefs. So then they played the Titans on Tuesday, then they played the Chiefs on the following Monday, and then they followed those two. Again, Titans game, they got blown out. It wasn't even competitive. And then they followed that up with a loss to Kansas City. Again, Kansas City being Kansas City, a great team. But then the next 2 games, they didn't quite play great. Didn't score a touchdown against the Jets, which is unheard of. And sorry, but I feel bad for Jets fans. It's Adam Gase. It's like looking at the Rams and saying, looking at Jared Goff and the Rams and saying, well, they had Jeff Fisher. But what's Jeff Fisher ever done with a quarterback? Sorry, I think my shots at Jeff Fisher, but he's a great coach. He just couldn't get his quarterbacks there. Yeah, there was another game in there. I can't think of what it was, and it was games where you're just like, it was New England. It was a New England game. I'm like, okay, they can't stop the run right now. They relied on Cam Newton fumbling the football. The defense came up big, and they won 21-17, but that could have very well been the season right there. If they lose that game, I would think they're looking at a wild card as opposed to the division.
What team do you feel like the Bills match up the best with?
I would say if we see Miami, because for some reason the Dolphins bring out the best in Josh Allen. So far in his career, his best games have come against Miami. Up until this season, when he has a big game, it's against Miami. So that's the one I look at and I go, okay, if we get them for the 3rd time, this will be fun. An old school Miami-Buffalo rivalry.
Who's a team that you don't want to see in the AFC playoffs?
I would say that Tennessee again, or Baltimore. I think I don't want to overlook Cleveland, but Cleveland's kind of like the Bills were last year. They're in the playoffs. They're going to be young. They can control the game with 2 top 5 running backs, 2 top 10 running backs in the league. Their defense is good. I just don't trust Baker Mayfield yet. The Ravens, they have a coach who's been there, that they can run the ball. That's the one part of the Bills that I'm still not sold with. Their big defensive tackle they had holding out for COVID. And letting Jordan Phillips go and letting Shaq Lawson go. The Bills at the beginning of the year, that they couldn't stop the run. Okay, how are we going to stop this team? They're just going to run the balls. It's going to be like the Rex Ryan defense. Let Lev Bell run 250 yards. Those are the 2 teams I would actually don't want to see, at least at this point.
When McDermott was hired, what were your thoughts? I know there was a few coaches. I know the Doug Marrone era that occurred and how brief that was. But what were your thoughts when McDermott got there, and were you sold on him?
So I've got my best friend's an Eagles fan. I'm growing up out there. Knowing McDermott as a part of that Andy Reid tree, I was a little more comfortable knowing that what stability he brought. You come from 2 seasons of 8-8 and a 7-9 season under Rex Ryan / Anthony Lynn, and you go, they don't need him out. That Rex Ryan, you don't need a coach like that. You need someone who's just going to come in, do work, create culture, and that's what the combination of McDermott and B. That was the big thing. Is I think when you had McDermott and then you brought the GM in, and that made it, it was a complete culture change in that facility.
I know there's probably a lot of school of thought, especially tearing down what Rex did. At least he might have been one more year away from getting them over that hump. But again, seeing that slow growth and seeing everything occur, how much patience did you guys have to put in on all this? It's tough for any fan to buy in on some things, especially waiting for that time to come. Every
year it was like, okay, it's a 3-year process. And it was, all right, we traded for Sammy Watkins. I'm like, well, who's our quarterback? Gabriel Davis and all these other guys who you're like, they're not franchise quarterbacks. And then you finally go out and you spend draft capital and you get Josh Allen, and you've got the draft night tweets and the working as, just pure raw talent. And you see this first year comes out and, so you see some slow progression, but McDermott's a defensive guy. They bring in Brian Dable and he starts to work with him. But that's, as a Bills fan, it's like being a Browns fan. You need nothing but patience.
Now, as we go into the Super Bowl prediction, I know that, again, some people think that the winds of change might be coming. Neither team from the Super Bowl might be showing up in the Super Bowl again, at least among some of the schools of thought. What are your predictions for the AFC champion, the NFC champion, and the final score of the Super Bowl?
I'd I always remember laughing. There was always Chris Berman in the '90s would pick Niners Bills, and it would never be Niners Bills. Again, have to think the Bills are going to come out of the AFC. They have as good a chance as any now. Picking up the second seed. If they don't lose one of their next two games, I think that that's a good chance. That again goes through Kansas City, but I still think Buffalo win that game with the way they're playing. The NFC, it's the Packers to lose. So I think Jordan Love was like, okay, Aaron Rodgers, like, you know what? I'm just going to come out and sling it. So I think that'd be an entertaining Packers-Bills Super Bowl, and I'd say 24-17 Bills. I have to say that would be the final.
That's going to be a very interesting one. I mean, who knows? I mean, again, coming down to a touchdown or a late game, I was thinking it's going to be a bunch of shootouts, especially when you involve some of these teams in here. But, it all depends. Last year's Super Bowl wasn't a slugfest, and I was thinking we were going to see at least 100 or so points.
Yeah, but I was thinking you'd see a replay of the Rams-Chiefs game years ago in Mexico City where they put up 102 points or 101 points, something like that. The Niners, it just turned to again. I felt really good for Andy Reid watching him in Philly and the way he got ousted in Philly, or he ended there. So I thought I was very happy to see him get his title. I think McDermott brings the culture. I think it falls on Josh Allen if he can take that next step and not play hero ball. Josh Allen, that's the one thing that he does. Like if a lateral in last year's game, I know what he was trying to do, but you don't do that in the playoffs. You don't play hero.
For anyone who reached out to you about your thoughts on this, do you have social media? Where do you do for social media? Any shout outs?
I'm on Facebook. I'm based on Facebook. I'm not on social media very much.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's very interesting just seeing a lot. I mean, I know a lot of people don't do the social media thing. I mean, sometimes they see the toxicity of what's going on, or sometimes they're just too busy and don't want to get themselves in the little minutia of everything that's going on, because then you feel like you're preoccupied to do this and do that and follow this, and it can be a big addiction too.
Yeah.